The Divine Arsonist, A Tale of Awakening, written and read by the author Jacob Nordby. Chapter 6. I opened my eyes Sunday morning without drama. If my waking memory was accurate, there were no ghost visitors or disturbing visions during the night. Clouds had moved in overnight. The gray light was sullen, and misty rain was blowing against the windows. The tops of the mountains stood shrouded in fog, faint, as if thick gauze swirled in the folds of the valley. Usually when this happened, I would light up the fireplace, start a movie, and enjoy the feeling of silent isolation. Today was different. It was cold in the lodge. I felt anxious and irritated. The clock on the microwave read 7:43. It was early, but I had nothing left to do here. Time to go. Packing and cleaning took about 20 minutes. I had spent very little time indoors, so my visit created none of the usual weekend havoc. I found my keys and pushed the little remote starter button on the fob. Outside, the car turned over, then hummed, smooth as oil. The lockup process was simple. I set the thermostat, turned off the lights, and activated the alarm system. Our cabin was at the end of a long private road, and we had full-time neighbors who loved patrolling the woods with guns. These deterrents had still not prevented some local thieves from breaking in last year and literally stealing the new carpet right off the floor. I had to submit multiple pictures, a lengthy explanation, and the official sheriff's report to our skeptical insurance claims adjuster to cover the damage. "They stole what?" he said after I finished telling him how I discovered the living room furniture pushed out of the way and the carpet gone. "Yeah," I said, "just the carpet. It was cut clean out, but they left the padding. Nothing else is missing either. It's weird." "Weird," he agreed. "Well, since you aren't claiming that they swiped your antique shotguns and a sack of Krugerrands, we won't do a major investigation. Get an alarm system, okay? I'll have a hard time paying for new carpet more than once." I smiled and shook my head as I punched the security code on my way out the door. Some redneck's hound dog down in a collection of converted school buses and single-wide trailers known as Clear Creek Subdivision was probably scratching fleas in wall-to-wall luxury. It wasn't raining hard, but the steps down to my car were slick. Blinking against the cold droplets in my face, I tossed the duffel bag into the back seat and got behind the wheel. Turning on the heater and wiping the chilly moisture on my pants legs, I was grateful for the already warm engine. The windshield had fogged, so I sat there mulling things over for a few minutes while it cleared. I drove back in silence. Emerson's Bible sat on the passenger seat, and I glanced at it now and then. Once I reached over and touched the leather cover. It was the only tangible remnant of my strange weekend. If it hadn't been sitting there, where I could verify its existence, I would probably do what Lucia suggested and forget the whole experience. I'd write it off as the combined effect of stress, fatigue, and alcohol mixed with mountain solitude like some surreal cocktail. Yet there the book sat while I drove. My emotions were quiet, but thoughts flew back and forth as rapidly as the windshield wipers. What will I do? If I go for it and meet Lucius again, what will actually happen? He said I might have a hard time returning to what I call my normal life. What was that all about? I mean, am I ready to leave my life behind me? What does that really mean? Again, I felt myself leaning out over a terrifying height. All these questions settled in my gut and hardened into a solid, cold knot. I arrived home and stopped in front of the house. Most of the drive was a blur, and I sat there in the car feeling unprepared to rejoin the whirl of life. The dashboard clock read 8:54 a.m. Jennifer didn't expect me home yet. I shifted back into drive and rolled away from the house. Maybe a latte will get me up to speed, I thought. About 4 minutes later, I was standing in line at my favorite Starbucks. Even on the outskirts of a smaller city like Boise, the famous coffee chain had locations everywhere. This particular one was like my second office. I often held casual meetings, read the paper, and networked with the regular crowd. I was a well-known figure here, and Lisa, the head barista, smiled at me when I approached the counter. She liked the nickname I coined for her. She adopted it and had a special name tag engraved with "Coffee Ninja" that she was wearing now. "Hey, you," she said. "What can I get for you?" Finally, something normal, I thought. Right now I think I'll hang my hat on anything. Triple grande light foam latte, por favor, I said. Extra hot. "And can I get a name for this order, sir?" she asked, prim and proper. "Xavier," I said. It was my little game to come up with weird names. It was my fun idea to hear the baristas call them out over the noise in the crowded coffee shop. She raised her eyebrows as if this were all new to her. "One triple grande light foam latte with extra steam coming up shortly. That'll be $3.78, sir." "How've you been?" I asked her, since there was nobody in line. She sighed and shrugged. "Oh, it's all good. I've been here since 5:30. We had a big rush earlier. Must have been the rain. Everyone wanted their coffee today." She glanced at me. "How are you doing? You aren't your usual dapper self. Have you been camping or something?" I looked down at my clothes and ran a hand over my face. I was a little rough. Probably smelled bad, too. "Yeah, just pulled in from being up at our mountain place. Sorry to offend your delicate sensibilities." She sniffed. "I'll let it slide this time, but let's observe proper dress code in the future, okay?" Someone got behind me in line. Grinning, I nodded at Lisa and shuffled sideways so she could get back to work. She handed me the hot cup and smiled. "Have a good day, Xavier," she said, and leaned forward. "My advice? Take a shower. Your wife will thank me." I found a dark leather chair in one corner and sat sipping coffee for a while. I had brought the book in with me, and I held it, unopened, on my lap. I wasn't ready to dive back into it just then, but it was comforting to have it close. An hour passed. I was isolated inside the busy shop. Usually I wandered around, finding acquaintances and chatting with strangers. Today I kept popping outside the social bubble and sat like a silent observer while it happened all around me. My phone vibrated and broke what could have turned into another day-long reverie. It was a text message from Jennifer. "Let me know when you are back in town. Meet up for lunch with kids?" I sipped my now-cold coffee and typed with my right thumb. "Okay, early one. Where?" A few seconds later it buzzed again. "We'll get the gang moving. Cracker Barrel in 20 minutes? "Perfect." I hit send. I got up and left without my usual round of farewells and handshakes. Cracker Barrel was only about 3 miles away. I got there quickly and secured a table for 5 near the big fireplace. The breakfast crowd was gone and the Sunday lunch rush hadn't started yet. It was quiet in the restaurant, and I enjoyed watching the fire chew on big oak logs in the grate. Fire. I suddenly saw myself sitting in a red canvas chair by the campfire and Lucius leaning forward, gesturing with his hands as he talked. I shook my head. Need to stay in the real world for a while. Just then, with a rush of feet and coats, my family arrived. I stood and held out my arms. "Hello, my beautifuls," I said. Jennifer stopped a few feet away and let the kids mob me. "Daddy!" Our 6-year-old twins, Jay and Megan, yelled in unison. I squatted, and they both grabbed me around the neck. Jay, 1 minute older than his sister, had sandy hair and strong shoulders. He was aggressive and competent. I always called Megan my elf princess. She had a mass of red gold curls, large luminous eyes, and freckles on her nose. She was tiny and felt fragile when I wrapped my arm around her. Our oldest son, at 10, Nathan, stood waiting for his turn. I let go of the twins and gave him a hug. He was getting tall, this one. He would pass my 5 feet 9 inches by the time he was a sophomore in high school. Must be the genes from my wife's side. Short, stalwart Norwegians, some mixture of other northern Europeans populated my own ancestry. He was sensitive and intelligent. Nathan's advanced vocabulary by age 2 had earned the nickname of Little Professor. "Hi, Daddy said. Then he wrinkled his nose and sniffed conspicuously. "You smell like smoke." "Well, I should," I said. "I just spent 2 days by a campfire." Jennifer watched all of us and smiled. Our eyes met. She was beautiful and reserved. We married when she was only 18 by a month, and I was just over 20. That was almost 14 years ago. We had grown up together. A lot of water over the dam between us, but mostly smooth sailing these days. I leaned forward to kiss her, and she squeezed me a little tighter than usual. "I missed you," she whispered in my ear. "Glad you're back." I held her for a few seconds, and then we found places around the table. Back home after lunch, I spent a few hours puttering around in aimless circles. After a long hot shower, I sank into a leather couch to watch football. Jen curled up at the other end under the blanket and dozed. The kids entertained themselves in far reaches of the house. It was a perfect day to fade into a numb zone of drowsy disconnect. I couldn't do that, though. Every time I would try to immerse myself in the game, my mind wandered off and began gnawing on questions that brought me no comfort. The television's incessant voice became unbearable. I touched the mute button and sat barely watching the moving figures on the screen. Jennifer hadn't asked about my trip. She probably assumed that it was uneventful. What was there to talk about? She hadn't seen Emerson's Bible yet, but if I actually accepted the invitation from Lucius to meet at the end of next week, I'd owe her some kind of explanation. What could I tell her? A visitor from a different dimension showed up at the cabin. He said that I had some sort of date with destiny. He gave me a book that was going to be a key to my personal transformation. My life would probably never be the same. I was supposed to go back to the cabin next week and dressed in a suit. I had no idea what would happen next or even if I'd be back anytime soon. Spilling a story like that on my wife would require courage and a reckless panache that I was certain I didn't possess. I got up and wandered into my office. My computer never left its bag up at the cabin. Email was probably piled up. I stared at the leather case with distaste. I had stepped out of the mad rush on Friday and now had no desire to rejoin the rat race. That's what I get for playing hooky, I thought. The same whole-body weariness that prompted my escape from the office a couple of days ago returned. Irritated and dissatisfied without knowing why, I fiddled with the window blinds and looked outside. The sky had cleared and the afternoon looked brighter. My phone buzzed with another incoming text message. This time it was my friend Mike. Cigars? He had been a lawyer in a past life, and his messages were often curt. I wrote back, "Perfect, leaving now, okay?" A second later, buzz. "Confirmed." I pulled on a zip-up fleece jacket and peeked in the den to check on Jen. She was sleeping soundly. I found one of the twins and instructed them that when Mommy wakes up, let her know that I'll be back in a while. Oh, and try to be quiet so she can sleep. Mike and I sat in lawn chairs on his back deck under a tall propane heater, the kind they use at restaurant patios to keep away the chill. We enjoyed smoking cigars together. He had an extensive humidor and knowledge to match. We were both in the mortgage lending business and often compared notes or commiserated with each other about the state of industry affairs. He was older than I and had put on extra life mileage with a 10-year legal career before he'd launched a series of successful brokerages. Now he consulted and coached small business owners toward what he called entrepreneurial fulfillment. I often asked for his advice, not just because of his business acumen either. Mike was a lifelong student of achievement. He coined a phrase that I hoped would end up in my own eulogy someday. It was printed across the back of his business cards. Living inspired and fully engaged. I got a lot out of our friendship and hoped that I could leak the story of my weekend to him and get his objective advice. "So," he said, and paused to tap the ash from the end of his hand-rolled Opus X, "you went to the cabin without me." Turned out I needed some solitude," I said, bracing for an onslaught of friendly sarcasm. Mike had visited the mountain lodge many times with me, and I knew he'd be disappointed to miss a getaway. He just grinned and leaned back to blow a plume of smoke into the weak sunshine. I leaned my elbows on my knees. "It was a quick trip," I said. "I took off early Friday. Almost didn't happen." He held up his ever-present BlackBerry. "Funny, damn thing never even rang. Huh. Wonder if it was broken on Friday when you tried to call." He shook it and held it up to his ear. We both chuckled and then smoked in silence for a while. Finally, the urgency of the story within me could wait no longer, and I decided to wade in before the conversation changed direction. "So," I began, "this is going to be kind of weird." He raised one eyebrow. "Sounds normal coming from you so far. Carry on. I'll be the judge of weird." "No, seriously, something happened at the cabin. I can't wrap my head around it, and I'm afraid that anyone who hears this will think I'm nuts. Hell, maybe I am nuts." I was transported back to the sensations of my bizarre weekend for a moment. Fear, exaltation, confusion. I rallied, and Mike was regarding me in silence. His expression said, "Tell me more." He was a good listener. So I told him. Everything. It all poured out of me. I found myself digressing into emotional descriptions that forced tears in my eyes to spill down my cheeks. He didn't interrupt, just sat there quietly drawing on his cigar and letting the smoke drift away on the chilly breeze. His eyes were very still and wise while he listened. My disjointed tale ended. Now I have this book I can't show anyone, and a choice to make that seems like it will change my whole life one way or the other. I didn't ask for any of this, but I can't ignore it either. I have this knowing that whatever is going on is real, and it feels very important. Mike's expression was inscrutable. He just sat there, holding his cigar loosely in his fingers, and looked at me. I wiped my face on my sleeve and drew on my own cigar a few times. It had gone out while I talked. I gently knocked off the ash and relit it. It helped to do something with my hands. Mike had not spoken a word yet. Finally, he cleared his throat and rubbed his chin. "Well, you know what Yogi Berra would have said right now, don't you?" I shook my head no. He grinned. "When you come to a fork in the road, take it." He must have worried that I might be offended by his humorous response, because he quickly continued, "But really, I have no idea how to answer. Coming from almost anybody but you, I'd say take the crack pipe out of your mouth and get back to reality. This sounds like Art Bell stuff, but you're not one to make things up. One big lesson I've learned over the years is to trust those things you call knowings a minute ago. If it's that real and solid inside you, you should pay attention. So what's your gut telling you about this choice?" I shook my head. "I know that I should meet Lucius next weekend. I know that. But the things I don't know argue against a leap of blind faith." "Things you don't know like—" "Well, my wife and kids. What will I tell them? I don't know how long I'll be gone. And the business. These people, my partners and staff, they depend on me. We're going through a tough time right now. If I don't stay on my game, I'm not sure it will all hold together. We have debts and leases and—" Mike held up his hand. "Hang on. I didn't say that everything would be neat and tidy. I said you should pay attention to your intuitions. You want to know why?" I nodded. A Chicago journalist, Sidney Harris, once wrote, "Regret for the things we did can be tempered by time. It is regret for the things we did not do that is inconsolable." "So you're saying I should do this thing?" I said. "No, you don't get to put this on me. I'm saying that you need to look deep into your heart and mind. Make your decision based upon things other than all the pressures that would normally keep your head down and doing what you've always done. This feels like an important time for you, and I think you're the only one who can choose. Just be sure you do this one for yourself and not for anyone else." I felt resistance inflate like a steel balloon in my chest. "Mike, you know that's not how I do things. It's the needs of the group, my team, my family. They always come first. I'm not very good at making choices that'll create hardship for other people." "Yep," he said, drawing out the word deliberately. "That's exactly what I mean. May I be completely honest with you?" I nodded. "No, I mean really painfully honest." I raised my eyebrows. "Sure, Mike." "Jacob, I've known you for a few years. We're friends. I've hung around your office and watched you in action. You're a wonderful guy. You care about people and they love you for it. To be perfectly frank, though, I think you're stuck. You've built a business that looks great from the outside, but I'm an insider. I know that things are a mess. Everything depends on you. At least you think it does. In fact, your wonderful guyness is kind of a trap. You're stuck in it, and so is everyone else around you. In our many conversations over lots of cigars, I see how much you long to take off in your life. You've things to share with the world. I've read some stuff you've written. Listen, you want more, but you think you have to earn your freedom to pursue it." I felt a choking pressure in my throat. I interrupted. "But I do have to earn my freedom. It's not fair to these other people if I led them into a—" Mike held up his hand again. "Let me finish. I can't tell you exactly how to work this all out. All I know is what you just told me lines up with everything I've been feeling about you for a while now. As your friend and as a fellow entrepreneur, I've observed your growing disconnect and unhappiness with your business. I wasn't sure how to broach the subject with you because I know that your whole life is tied up in what you've built. It's not easy for me to tell you that despite your passion and hard work, you've actually sort of painted yourself into a corner." He paused to take a quick puff on his cigar. I waited. I had a sense of disoriented nausea rolling around in my guts. Mike squinted thoughtfully into the distance and blew out a stream of smoke. "Look," he said, "if you hired me as a consultant, I would ask you a whole bunch of questions. I'd learn all the things I already know about your business. We'd talk finances and management. I'd ask you about your process and your vision for the future of your company. I'd charge you a lot of money. Then after all of that, if it turned out that things were in a crisis mode, I would get you alone and ask you one more question, the big one. I would look you straight in the eye and say, Mr. President, you have big problems on your hands, but I can help you fix them. I just need to know one thing. Do you have a burning desire and the absolute 100% commitment to make the changes and tough choices it will take for your company to survive? If you didn't instantly respond in the affirmative, I would act like a doctor delivering the bad news about cancer. Then it's just a matter of time. He looked over at me. Pretty heavy, huh? Well, yeah, I said, but I'm not sure what you're saying to me. I'm supposed to shut my company down? He was shaking his head. No, he said. I'm saying that over time you have revealed enough so I know that your heart's deepest desire isn't to captain the company you set out to build. I don't think it's just tough times in the industry either. I believe you have worn yourself out, and the freedom you hope to achieve by chasing down the American dream now just seems like some kind of sick fairy tale. You aren't rich, although most people probably think you are. You aren't really your own boss. Now the juice you always got from being a super servant to everyone in sight is starting to run out, too. You're frazzled and exhausted, but you don't think you really deserve a break until you take care of everything and everyone else. Again, I'm being brutally honest here. Can you handle it, or have I gone too far? I sighed, feeling sad. I can handle it. I just don't know how it really helps. My decision seems to have gone from should I take a little stab at a weird adventure to should I wreck my entire life and the lives of everyone who depends upon me. Mike tossed his cigar down in the white and gold Tommy Bahama ashtray that sat on the small table between us and stood up. Jacob, hear me clearly on this, please. As your friend, I know you are not and have not been happy for some time. I don't know where your weird adventure, as you call it, will take you, but I'm begging you now to decide what to do based on what you know is right. Whichever way you choose to go, don't do this for anyone but yourself. Follow your heart, please. That's all I ask. I didn't say anything for a second. He held up his finger. Oh, and one more thing. Maybe, just maybe, it's time you figured out that other people could make it without you. Your playing God in everyone's life might not be good for you or for them. I felt bruised and stunned by the reflection he held up before me. I wanted to be angry, to mount a defense, but I couldn't. Mike had given me the gift of some painful insights. I would love to pretend they didn't strike me dead center. But like darts, they hit the bullseye of a Jacob-shaped target. I stood up. Mike stepped over and put his hand on my shoulder. Our eyes met, and he shook me gently. I love you, man. You know that, right? I nodded. He patted me on the back. Okay, call me later this week? I nodded again and walked toward my car in silence. As I drove home, a question kept surfacing. If I'm in denial about my career, what other messes have been swept under the rug in my life?